capitalism is bad.
I agree with that.
In regards to a lot of fantasy media, the large majority of the American population will view critiques of capitalism as unrealistic or flat out ignore the critique altogether. While I don't expect everyone to go into games like Risk of Rain and come out of it thinking about how it's about space colonialism and that the player is literally committing genocide, oftentimes the more obvious critiques of capitalism can go over people's heads. It feels crazy to say, but there are people that will play Cyberpunk and then refuse to acknowledge that the game is a blatant critique of unregulated corporations under capitalism. However, sometimes people will try to politically analyze something and will completely miss the mark. While researching this video, I stumbled across a user post on Steam that called into question how healthy it was for society that this game became so popular. They write, quote, "The game, intentionally or not, uses gameplay mechanics to entice players into a cycle of consumerism. The relentless pursuit of profit quotas at the expense of risking lives within the game parallels real-world corporate pressures. By gamifying the corporate environment, Lethal Company inadvertently normalizes and justifies unsafe working conditions, exploitative labor practices, and the relentless pursuit of profit above all else. Engaging with Lethal Company could potentially instill subconscious acceptance and normalization of harmful capitalist practices. Players, knowing or not, might internalize and replicate these behaviors. Because of that, I don't know how comfortable I am with how popular this game has become. I will flat out say that this is a laughable analysis of Lethal Company, but instead of just pointing and giggling, I want to dissect why this user might have thought this and why it is wrong. Lethal Company is one of my favorite games of all time. Are you fucking developed by a single person, Zeekerss. It provides the perfect balance between silliness and genuine fear. Creepy little fuck. Oh! Lethal Company is one of the scariest games I've ever played. Something about the juxtaposition of goofing off with your friends and then a few minutes later, not being able to find them while a bracken is stalking you. It makes the fear so much more intense. Ah! Fuck! But one of the scariest aspects of this game is the looming threat of the company. It's possible that the name of the company is Halden Electronics, but that's mainly just a theory.
In the Islamic faith, the number 23 matters a lot, meaning that those 23...
So, for this video, I will just refer to them as the company. The company is an unknown entity located somewhere. Every game of Lethal Company functionally follows the same formula. You pick a moon, you find an old abandoned building and look for scrap. You sell that scrap to hit a quota every 3 days.
Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, we interrupt this video to let you know that 99% of you aren't subscribed right now. I have a cat, and she is beautiful, and you must subscribe so that I can feed her. Also, I have a Ko-Fi link in the description if you feel like donating, but you don't have to. Okay, bye!
The more dangerous moons reap more rewards because they have more scrap, which you will eventually have to go to due to the quota rising every time you meet it. The truth behind why the player characters are going to these moons to find scrap is entirely unknown, which adds to the mystery of the company. But the company gets around that by manipulating the workers. When you start a new Lethal Company save, you are greeted by a robotic voice that welcomes you to the company. The robot says, quote, "We trust you will be a great asset to the company." This greeting, while seemingly positive, highlights a striking absence of human interaction. Humans are emotional and social creatures, and personal connections often strengthen workplace satisfaction. And this also works inversely. Lack of social interaction and communication between the employer and employee can lead to the employee not feeling valued. So to compensate, the company does just barely enough to encourage the worker. The robotic voice is a grim reminder that the player is a tiny cog in a machine too large for them to even comprehend, and the reality is that the workers are valued only for their productivity rather than as an individual. The company is tricking the player character into thinking that this was a good decision, that you, the player character, made the right choice by deciding to work for the company. The dissonance between the message being conveyed by the company and the reality of the player's experience is felt, even if it's in the back of the player's mind. The voice tells you, "We value you. We want you here, and you will be great, but not as a human, as an asset to the company." This idea of valuing the asset, not the person, can be felt when the employees aren't acting the exact way the company wants them to, so they resort to manipulation through monetary incentives. If the players sell more items than required to meet the quota, they will get an overtime bonus. Or, if the quota is met 2 or 3 days before the required date, a bonus of $15 or $30 are added respectively. However, if the quota is met with 0 days left on the deadline, the company will deduct $15 from the overtime bonus. While this may not seem like blatant manipulation due to the fact that it's hard for the company to manipulate someone that they have no direct contact with, giving bonuses or deducting money is a form of positive and negative incentive. This deduction from your overtime bonus is a lose-lose scenario, considering that the only way to get the most return on your scrap is to wait until the last day to sell it. In an article about toxic and manipulative leadership, psychologist Ruchi Sinha, your manager might use praise, compliments, small favors, and excessive public recognition to get you to accept responsibilities beyond your role. Often, requests to do additional work can follow the public praise and glory. While it's hard to accept any responsibilities beyond your role, in Lethal Company, the company is constantly manipulating the player character into doing more work. And the moment the players don't meet the increasingly difficult quota, they are killed, dumped into the vacuum of space, likely to never be found again. This also brings up the interesting contrast of playing Lethal Company with a few friends and playing alone. In multiplayer, a lot of the fear and tension is offset by being surrounded by friends or 3 random people. But at least they're real. However, in single player, the lack of human interaction fosters isolation and anxiety, even when inside the safety of the ship. The only interaction you have with any sign of human life is that robotic voice, which this line of thinking requires the assumption that the company is run by humans. In Lethal Company, every time you earn money, it can be spent by shopping at the terminal. This store ranges from useful equipment to help your runs, or some quality of life improvements for you and your coworkers, to useless junk you will never need outside of it being a gag. The Steam user that I mentioned before is correct in saying that Lethal Company uses gameplay mechanics to entice players into a cycle of consumerism. However, what they fail to understand is that this is a critique of consumerism and corporate greed. The only way the player makes money is through the company, and the only things they can purchase are from the company. This creates a circulating economy so that the money earned by the player goes directly back into the company.
Keeping the money moving.
Well, no, but if we just redistribute these, then people will continue to drink for free.
Okay,
How does this work, Mac?
the money keeps moving in a circle.
The problem with what this user is trying to argue is that it lacks the perspective of someone who is familiar with Lethal Company. In no way does Lethal Company argue that the actions of the company are remotely good or morally justifiable. As many were quick to point out in the comments of the posts, this game and how it represents corporations is a satire of the real world. On the most surface level experience of the game, the player will realize as soon as they see a bracken that they have made a mistake in deciding to come to any of these planets. While this is a silly game that's fun with friends, if you put yourself into the employee's shoes, you will quickly realize that this is not a favorable scenario that shows the good side of consumerism and capitalism. The world of Lethal Company is neck deep in some capitalistic clusterfuck, and it would be one thing if the game pretended like the lives of the employees are great. But they aren't, and they don't. They sleep in a cramped spaceship, risk their lives every day for pennies, and the money that they do make just goes right back to the top dog. This is not a healthy way to live, and it is not being presented as such. If Lethal Company truly supported a consumerist capitalist lifestyle, it would follow the lead of almost every other video game by filling it with FOMO tactics and microtransactions, but Lethal Company doesn't do that. If we look below the surface of just the aesthetics of the game and dig into the underlying story of Sigurd, it backs up everything that I've said before this. The first log reads,
"Hello. I am writing this log to keep myself sane. I couldn't find a way to do the most basic thing on this old, janky butt computer, so I had Desmond add it in, the log feature. Till now, I've just been adding my own notes to the bestiary, whatever I know. My brother said I should keep a journal, so I'm doing what I can. I'm writing in a professional manner, as these logs could become a historical record, as it'll probably be here for years. just as long as there isn't a clean wipe. That's what Desmond said. If you're reading it in the future, you are probably from another crew. The turnover rate here is enormous. Maybe because this job sucks and everyone turns over dead. Maybe I can give some help when I have some experience. End log. Oh, our names are Sigurd, me, Richard, Desmond, Jess.
There's a couple of interesting parts about Sigurd's first log. The first is that, despite claiming to write it in a professional manner, Sigurd doesn't spell the word professional correctly. This could suggest that Sigurd is generally uneducated, or doesn't care enough to try and correct himself when he misspells or uses incorrect grammar. I want to make something abundantly clear. There is nothing inherently wrong with being uneducated. But what is wrong is how corporations exploit uneducated or unskilled workers by making them do the work that they wouldn't do themselves, justifying it because they see the less educated as less valuable than them. This is something that occurs in the real world and is often a justification for modern-day slavery. A study in 2014 investigated how New Zealand's fishing trade was so efficient, and the answer is by practically enslaving immigrants who were desperate for work, to the point where they had no other option. These families were reportedly getting only $75 a month before they were offered the fishing jobs, which gave them $200 to $500 a month. A standard work week in America is 40 hours a week, and if you do the math, that means that these workers were making between $1.25 to $3.12 per hour. But these workers are also not even working an average 40-hour week. They live on these fishing boats. One worker has been quoted as saying, "We are slaves because normal employees have a voice, but we do not. Didn't expect this when we signed the contract, but once on the boat in New Zealand, we are trapped. We were trapped into modern slavery." The reason this study spoke to me so much was because there is a shocking parallel between these real people that are stuck on fishing boats and the Lethal Company crew. They are stuck, cut off from the outside world. These industries put their workers in an environment that strips them of autonomy and puts them in hazardous situations. They are subjected to relentless pressure, with their safety and dignity compromised in the pursuit of profit and quotas, which Sigurd realizes the more he works for the company. His next log reads,
Gosh, this suit is squeezing me like I'm a gosh damn mummy. I'm a grown man, give it some space between the legs. It's killing me, I'm dying. Hope you're happy, Dad. I finally got a job. Screw you. Everyone here smells, especially Rich. I'm gonna throw him in the lake. I don't care what it's made of. I love being on camera duty. Oh, I forgot the date. It's August 24th, 1968. This keyboard has... Today we found a couple frying pans and a big nail worth almost nothing. What is the company even using it for?
In this log, Sigurd expresses the social pressure applied by his father that led him to get a job. This was likely the only job he could get, given his credentials, so he was desperate. He continues this sentiment in his logs, saying,
I've been thinking a lot. I think this job is shady. If you're reading this, you probably got here the same as me. The pay is good, the contract only lasts a season, they ran you through their assessment exam on the phone with a weird voice, you signed the contract on the shuttle with the rest of your crew, but the whole time, you didn't talk to anyone. The shuttle was autopiloted, I think the voice on the phone was fake. I've had the worst dreams, I think I just want to go back home. But I'm not going to crawl home, crying and screaming on Dad's front door. That's not his son. That's not Sigurd.
Oftentimes, a criticism of low-income workers is that they should simply find another job and stop complaining. But this comes from a place of pure ignorance. Realistically, jobs are not handed to people, especially if they come from poverty.
Get a job. Oh, get a job? Yeah. Just get a job? Why don't I strap on my job helmet and squeeze down into a job cannon and fire off into Jobland, where jobs grow on jobbies?
Poverty is a trap designed to keep the average person down. In this log, Sigurd mentions the pay being good, but this goes back to the fact that this job is a literal trap that dumps their employees like waste as soon as they stop being useful. And the only way for active company workers to spend the money they earn is by giving it back to the company. The pay may be good, but the risk that is required to get the money is far too great for it to genuinely be worth it. Additionally, there isn't any bonus for coming back empty-handed. The crew only earns what they sell, so if you spend hours looking and find nothing, you don't get paid. This is very similar to the real-world issue that is the exploitation of contract workers. Independent contract work is a kind of labor that generally has workers being paid per gig instead of getting a salary or a set amount per hour. This is why the lethal company employees are independent contractors, since they get paid based on how much scrap they gather, and nothing else. In America, there are roughly 10.5 million to 15 million independent contract workers. There's absolutely no shame in being an independent contractor, but the issue, of course, doesn't stem from the workers, it stems from the corruption of the system that is supposed to protect them. Independent contractors don't get simple protections that normal employees get. According to equitablegrowth.org, they are denied crucial workplace rights such as 40-hour work weeks, the right to organize, protection from discrimination, and employer-provided health benefits. And not only that, but they make significantly less money than someone employed by a company. Quote, low and middle wage workers who become self-employed see lower take-home pay than they could have expected if they remained as wage earners. People in the bottom 75% of income-earning Washington residents, who make less than about $83,000 annually, earned $3,450 less in 2014 than their counterparts who remained just wage earners. This is also how rideshare services like Uber and Lyft exploit their workers, not giving them the safety that a normal job would have. But back to Sigurd. It's very clear that this job is having a severe psychological effect on Sigurd.
Date, September 4th, 1968. I got woken up early this morning because we were going to the company building to sell our useless garbage. The rate was 120%, which Desmond says is rare, and he didn't want to miss it. He's been watching it like the stupid stocks. It still sucks here. It still smells like a piece of shit. I can barely sleep. I heard the worst sound behind the wall of the company building. It sounded like crying red faces all churned up and swept away by concrete. Like the pestle and bowl my mom crushes up her seeds and spices in. I still hear it. It's a nightmare. No one else heard it. They don't know what to do. Jess thinks I'm homesick. No, I'm sick of this cheap suit.
The mental deterioration of Sigurd is very apparent as the logs progress. This is blatantly from the poor working conditions and the likely mental and physical trauma sustained from this job. These are not favorable circumstances. I would say that on a surface level, based on the environment and the obvious creepiness of the company, this game is not pro-capitalism or consumerism. And when you dig into Sigurd logs, Sigurd.
Portuguese.
And when you dig into Sigurd's logs, it only confirms that further. It doesn't take a degree in media literacy to discover this. The company prioritizes profit over the mental and physical health of its workers, which embodies the exploitative nature of capitalism. Workers are incentivized to collect scrap from dangerous abandoned moons to meet ever-increasing profit quotas, which highlights the relentless struggle for money at the expense of safety. Failure to meet these quotas results in literal death. But what if we analyze the company from a pro-capitalist perspective? We're about to get into some economic theories, and full disclosure, I am not an economist, just a college student who is interested in economics. But I'm going to explain this to the best of my ability, so strap in. In economics, there is something called the shareholder theory, which basically says that it is not only important, but is the sole duty of a corporation to make the shareholders money. This theory was mainly pushed by conservative Milton Friedman, and in his 1970 New York Times article, "The social responsibility of business is to increase its profits," he writes, "In his capacity as a corporate executive, the manager is the agent of the individuals who own the corporation or establish the eleemosynary institution, and his primary responsibility is to them." Which basically says that the CEO of a company works for the shareholders and is the top priority of the company. Not only does this slimy little guy believe that, but he believes that corporations should have no hand in social reform. According to Friedman, businessmen that concern themselves with, quote, providing employment, eliminating discrimination, avoiding pollution, and other social reform are, quote, unwitting puppets of the intellectual forces that have been undermining the basis of a free society these past decades. Basically, Friedman sincerely believes that not only should corporations not be concerned at all with societal reform, but if they are, then they are simply being influenced and cannot think for themselves. Friedman's philosophy brings up some interesting questions on the morality of what companies do. If we use the company and its blatantly immoral practices as an example, we can see the cracks in his ideology. For this analogy to work, we must assume that the company is based in a society similar to America, meaning that the company has a CEO and shareholders behind it. See, Friedman argues a consequentialist point of view, that if a CEO is committing acts that are not illegal but are immoral to the shareholders and customers, they, quote, can desert him for other producers and employers less scrupulous in exercising their social responsibilities. He takes the classic vote with your wallet stance. If you as a shareholder are against the practices of a corporation, then you should take your money to a company that fits your morals. So, from Friedman's point of view, in this hypothetical we have created, the company is not being immoral by giving employees bad working conditions, terrible sleeping quarters, constantly increasing the required quota, and literally executing their employees because the shareholders don't see a problem with all of that. Obviously, this is simply a hypothetical, but it demonstrates the issues with this kind of thinking. Friedman's philosophy puts money before the well-being of humanity, and time again, capitalism has proven that shareholders care more about their own pockets than the health of the lower class. Capitalists will always argue that the system works because it has worked for them. But behind every billion-dollar company, there's workers being exploited. The company, as an example, displays the most evil aspects of capitalism and what humans will do to make sure the numbers keep going up. Lethal Company shows the brutal and relentless force of capitalism and how the ones wielding that force will destroy everything in their way in the pursuit of a dollar. Sometimes with media that doesn't have Johnny Silverhand spelling it out for you,
If I need your body, I'll fucking...
it can be hard to distinguish between satirizations of the norm and reinforcements. But I really don't think Lethal Company is one of those cases. The game is simply not consumerist capitalist propaganda.
Waves eclipsed.
Oh shit. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/veryultraviolet. I stream whenever I want. I feel like I have more things to promote, but I can't think of anything right now, so that works. Yeah.
And that's why capitalism is bad.